Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Desert Island Discs here at the National Jazz Museum in Harlem. Today's guest will be the legendary saxophone player, Mr. Gary Bartz, joining us to share his perspective on Charlie Parker and the Charlie Parker Centennial. As always, Desert Island Discs is hosted by journalist and historian Ted Panken.
Welcome to Desert Island Discs. I'm Ted Panken, and this is a part of our 2020 series sponsored by the National Jazz Museum in Harlem, focusing on the music of Charlie Parker, perhaps, along with Louis Armstrong, the fount of modern improvisational expression in jazz. This is the third event of Desert Island Discs devoted for Bird in 2020. I'm not sure when you'll hear it because we're pre-recording. We did one with Sheila Jordan in the spring, one with Charles McPherson. That will be aired in the fall, as will this encounter with one of the most eminent saxophonists to be part of the scene over the last 55, 60 years, Gary Bartz, one of the greats. Before we begin, I just will say that the concept of this series is borrowed from a program that BBC in England has been airing since 1942, with the same title, Desert Island Discs, where people of from all walks of life pick the 5 or 6 selections that they want to accompany them should they be stranded on the proverbial desert island. We've been expanding that since 2015 at the National Jazz Museum in Harlem, and expanding it within the context of live performance before audiences. But that had to end because of the COVID-19 epidemic, the pandemic. So we're doing it Zoom, and that's how it's going to be. Before I start talking with Gary, we're going to hear music by Charlie Parker. And this is from his first commercial recording with a small ensemble from 1944, and it's called Red Cross. Red Cross, Charlie Parker's first real salvo with a small ensemble. The date was actually led by the guitar player, Tiny Grimes, who'd been playing with Art Tatum at the time,
Yeah.
several years, so you know he could handle that situation. The pianist was Clyde Hart, a very key figure in New York City jazz during the first 5 years of the 1940s, and his career was cut short. He died of tuberculosis in the mid 40s. But he was a key figure in a lot of the early bebop, a lot of the early manifestations of the music known as bebop. Jimmy Butts on bass and Harold Doc West on drums. And Charlie Parker.
Who was on
Jimmy
bass?
Jimmy Butts, B-U-T-T-S, and Harold Doc West on drums, who would record with Bird in Los Angeles a few years later on the Cool Blues session with Errol Garner out in Los Angeles. In any event, again, I'm Ted Panken, and you've already heard Gary, Bartz, and I exchanging a little bit. And thank you so much for agreeing to do this, Gary Bartz. We have a great program of music lined up for you over the next 75 to 90 minutes. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. How you doing, Ted?
I'm pretty good. I'm doing all right. When we went down the playlist, it took you about 15 minutes off the top of your head to come up with these tracks, and they're all great. And you've been listening to Charlie Parker for a very long time, and you said that this was the first Charlie Parker solo that you remember hearing.
Well, yeah, because the first time I heard Charlie, well, the first time I heard him, I didn't know who he was because I was 6 years old.
Okay.
And I heard this record. I used to go to my grandmother's house, and my uncle had all of these bebop records.
In Baltimore, right? You grew up in Baltimore.
In Baltimore, Maryland, yeah. Actually, he had all kinds of records, but these were the records I gravitated to. And when I ran across this record, and I guess I mean I was 6 years old. I don't remember exactly which one, but whatever one it was, I said to myself, as a 6-year-old, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. I want to do that. Can you imagine that? I mean, that's what. Look, and Mozart did it at 3. Beethoven did it at 3. Bud did it at 3.
Yeah. Abba Jamal did it at a very young age. Errol Garner, quite. It's not.
Yeah. It's not usual.
It's not usual, but it's not completely rare either.
Right. So anyway, so I made up my mind. That's what. And I didn't even know it was an alto. I didn't know what it was. It could have been a woman. Yeah, it could have been. I didn't know. But later I found out it was Charlie Parker, and he was playing alto saxophone. So you get to Red Cross. I remember that I had that. Well, he had that 78, and I used to listen to that all the time, and I must have somehow acquired it because I didn't get a horn until I was 11 years old. And so it was 5 years of me just listening to music. But in retrospect, after all these years, it hit me not the other day, but a while back. Listening is more important than playing.
Elaborate on that.
Well, we listen 100% of the time. We play 5%, 10. We have to listen when we play. We have to listen before we play, after we play. Listening is people pay come listen to us. That's what they're coming to. They're not come to see us. Yeah, that's good. But they come to listen. That's what's important. This is an art form for ears. No other sense. There's no other one of our senses that enjoys music like the ears. And so if you don't know how to listen,
you won't be very good at this.
Yeah. Well, can you just talk a little bit? I mean, this is maybe for the layman out there.
Mm-hmm.
What was Charlie Parker doing in 19? I mean, that's a solo from 1944.
Mm-hmm.
Now people had heard Bird, a couple of tracks by Bird when he was with Jay McShann. You
And
know, Hootie Blues in particular. But but most for a lot of people, that was the first time they heard Charlie Parker, and it blew a lot of minds.
yeah.
What was Charlie Parker doing that was so different from the norm of excellence circa
Mhm.
1944?
Oh well, he was beyond excellence. I mean, he was he ushered in an era of virtuosity. You know, people were playing, and people were good. People were great, but they had not reached that height of virtuosity that he and Art Tatum also and Bird worked in the what Connie's
I
as a
think the story is that they worked at a place called Monroe's, a chicken place.
washing dishes.
Although apparently that story may be apocryphal.
I don't
Uh,
think I'm not listening to him. If I
okay,
yeah, listening to him, I hear Art Tatum.
okay.
I hear Art Tatum. I hear Art Tatum in Train too, but I
Hmm.
hear a lot of Art Tatum. You know, I mean, just his runs. Listen to Bird's runs. That's Art Tatum,
Okay.
straight up. You know, so I mean, you know, that's what he brought. Well, one of the many things he brought. You know, but and also, you know, he listened. I mean, he actually made statement. You know, he had all of this. You have all this ammunition. You study, you practice, and when you get up there, you just you don't need to think about it. You just do it.
Hmm.
You know, and so that's why you can reach and when you know how to play from the inside, then you can bring out things that nobody's ever heard before.
Hmm.
And getting back to listening, no one could listen better than Miles. He was the champion listener of all time.
Well, you were on the bandstand with him for several years, so you would have firsthand knowledge of that fact.
Even if I wasn't, you can hear it because how he changed me because he heard from the inside. He heard from the inside, and then what other people are doing on the outside, he could say, well, you know, I'm gonna add this, you know, that's because he could hear it. You know, the job of a musician is to hear that which only you can hear,
Hmm.
you know, and that's what makes you an individual.
Um,
And so, but Bird, what you asked me, what did he bring? What he heard, he had to be a virtuoso because of what he heard. You know, depending on what you hear, that's what you have to work on. So if he heard all of that and all that fast, you know, and the chords on top of chord, you know, and using the top tones, you know, he had to have that virtuosity. So he had to work very hard at that.
hmm.
And the other thing, listening to Red Cross, I hear Ornette in
Hmm.
it. I hear a lot of Ornette.
Well, Ornette was 14 when that came out, 16 or so when it was released, 15 or 16,
Mm-hmm.
and so it was his directly formative years, and he was quoted as saying that he heard all of Parker's recordings when they came out in 46, 47, 48, and he learned them by ear. He
Yeah,
transcribed the solos.
proper way.
Fathead Newman described that to me actually in a conversation we had. David Fathead Newman.
Yeah. Yeah, you can hear it. He to me, he's the only person that really got Bird. He really understood Bird more than any of us.
Well, let's go into more. Let's flesh that out a little later. Let's hold that thought maybe and
Mhm.
talk about Ornette and Parker a little later. And get on to the next musical selection, which in the order we were speaking about is Bloom Dido, which is from a 1950 recording, but a studio recording with the unique configuration. It's Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie with Thelonious Monk on piano, the only commercial recording that Monk made with Charlie Parker.
And Buddy
Russell on bass and Buddy Rich on drums, another interesting combination. I just was listening earlier today to an air check of Bird playing Bloom Dido in Boston with Roy Haynes on drums. It is so loose and so free. I'm going to send you the link to it after we get off. It is just, as Arthur Taylor would say, supersonic. It's supersonic. But
Can I say one more thing?
Yes, please.
Yeah. About the Red Cross, and then move on. But it was fascinating just now to listen, because, like you said, Clyde Hart was on piano, right?
Yes. And
he's like a link. He's almost bebop, but he's still more swing. You know, and you hear it. And then when you hear Bird, he's straight up, he left the swing. He's got it's a bebop swing. It became a different kind of a swing. And it's a real subtle thing, because Clyde was playing everything that you hear Bud play. But if Bud played exactly what Clyde played, he wouldn't play it like that. It would be real straight up bebop. But Clyde hadn't gotten there yet, and he was just still swing, but on the way to bebop. He played everything, you know, doing the articulations, doing everything, but he still didn't have the bebop feel. Bebop is probably the hardest music ever, so far.
Okay, let's hear Bloom Dido. One little factoid about Bloom Dido. For a while, it was thought that Parker named it after his manager, a guy named Teddy Bloom, who was a violinist who played on the Just Friends session and other string orchestras. And he told Teddy Bloom that, but it turned out he named it for a Buffalo radio DJ named August Bloom, with the spelling of Bloom Dido. Teddy Bloom is B-L-U-M-E, August Bloom was B-L-O-O-M. But Bird tried to sell Teddy Bloom on the idea that he'd written it for Teddy Bloom. So that's just a little factoid to listen to while you hear Bloom Dido with Bird, Dizzy Gillespie, and Thelonious.
Mm. Wow.
Blundido. Wow.
Wow. Yeah. All virtuosos.
Yeah, yeah. Again, Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Thelonious Monk, alto sax, trumpet, piano. Curly Russell was the bassist, the mainstay of many a bebop session, and Buddy Rich on drums. Before we talk about that, I just want to step back 1 second to Red Cross again and say that that was, as Ellington would say, a tone parallel to a guy named Bob Red Cross.
Oh, right.
One word, who was band valet, I think, with the Billy Eckstine band, a friend to many musicians, and kind of raconteur and bon vivant, shall we say, who Parker got to know during his 8 months or so, or 6 months or so, with the Billy Eckstine Orchestra, which he had left shortly before the session that generated Red Cross. I just wanted to add that in there to the record. But what are your thoughts on hearing Blundido then? Anything? What would you say?
Yeah, no, that's straight bebop. That is straight bebop. He has gone into, where Red Cross was on the way, because and even going back to Red Cross, had that been a working band, I think it would have moved into where Bird was, but he's using, it's different from a working band. There's never been an innovation in this music that didn't come through a working band. That's why Dizzy, when Dizzy Max, when they had that band, that's why they innovated, because now everybody was on the same page, and not even on the same page. They were there, like not trying to get there, like on the Red Cross. They were trying to get there and understand this new form of music. But by the time Dizzy and Bird got together with everybody, they were on the same page. So they made.
By the time of that session, it's 1950, so everything is pretty.
Oh yeah, it was
set.
Yeah.
What do you think of now that session has sometimes generated a little shade from people who don't think, who didn't like, who thought that someone like Max Roach or Roy Haynes would have been a better suited drummer for a date like that as opposed to Buddy Rich. But I have to say, I think Buddy Rich actually, to me, sounds great.
Yeah, he held his own. The solo was great. Yeah. And even though, he wasn't a bebop drummer, that's what they're saying, which is what I was saying about the other. But he understood what was needed. And that's something that every musician needs to know when they accept a gig. What's needed, is if you go into it with your ego, like, oh, this is my chance to shine, that's not the proper way. It's all about the music. So, he knew what to do. He knew that, and Ed was great. That's a great record.
Well, so Gary, shall we go into the strings dates and into the dates that Gil Evans recorded, or would you like to do what would you like to do?
Look, anything you put up.
Well, just okay, but we have to remember we have one tune that we have to interpolate somewhere. So you tell me when it's the right time to do that.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe let's do that now.
Let's do that now. Okay. So one thing Gary forgot to mention when we went over the list was one of the revolutionary art documents of the 20th century, the 2.5 minutes of Coco, which is Bird's contrafact on Cherokee. from 1945. And while Martin, while my great engineer Martin Mejia sets it up and puts it in order, Gary, talk about this a bit because I know you have a lot to say about Coco.
Well, Coco, I mean, actually, I've been really studying it for a recording I'm getting ready to do. And so I've been listening to almost everything that every recorded example of Bird playing Cherokee. And to my amazement, he was playing that with Jay McShann. Did you know that?
I did not know that he. Yes, he did. I've heard him play Cherokee. There's a actually he was there's a 1937 version, like a home recording of him doing Cherokee. Not at all with in his advanced style, but Cherokee was a preoccupation of his from early on.
Yeah, no, he used Cherokee to figure out the probably the ground to lay the groundwork for the whole bebop era and laid the groundwork for what train then came along and took and like the baton. He took the baton and then he took it on, and who knows what's going to happen next, but he was playing some of the same ideas on the Jay McShann recording that he refined by the time he got to Coco. I mean, and every recording that I ever heard him do of Cherokee, he was working on all of the ideas that you finally hear in Coco. And that was amazing to me. And not only amazing, but it just confirmed how you have to study, and how this and how we are composers. I never consider myself as an improviser, because improvising means I didn't know what I was going to do. I always know what I'm going to do. And listening to that, Bird knew exactly what he was going to do. He composed that solo, and he would compose it differently every time. Yeah. And that's what throws people off. They think it's an improvisation because each time it's different, but he's composing it different. You can never, if you're composing music on the spot, it's hard to compose it the same way each time. But composing is what we do on the high end. Improvisation on the low end, yeah. People fumbling around and don't know where they're going, But that studying his solo confirmed, that what we're doing is composing. And that's what every great composer did. Beethoven, people used to go see Beethoven perform to hear him play off the top of his head, so they would call it. He would ask for melodies from the audience, and they would hum a melody, and he would take it and just go crazy.
Variations would be the word.
That's what we do.
Yeah, variations.
That's what this music is. This art form that people want to call jazz, it's theme and variation. And what has happened today with the way the teaching is so backwards, now it's morphed into theme and data. I no longer hear the variations. I hear the theme, then I hear chords. Beethoven didn't do that. Bird didn't do that. Miles didn't do that. Louis Armstrong didn't do that. Art Tatum didn't do that. But now we're teaching students how to do that, which is not what this is.
Let's hear Coco. It's before you play it, Martin, I'll just run down the personnel. It's Bird, of course. It's a session from the session that generated also Now's the Time in Billy's Bounce in late 1945. And it was and the other tracks from the session have Miles Davis on trumpet, Sadiq Hakim, also known as Archon Thornton on piano, Curly Russell, and Max Roach. But Dizzy Gillespie was at this session, and it was a little beyond what Miles could do in 1945. So Dizzy played the head with Bird, and then he comped also. So the piano copying is by Dizzy Gillespie on this,
Ah,
which gives
yeah,
you another sense of the genius of Dizzy Gillespie as well, when you
yeah,
see how far out is not the word, how startling this piece is. It still sounds new in 2020.
yeah,
Coco.
yeah. Man.
Coco. Gary Bartz, talk a little bit about Bird's phrasing and Bird's rhythmic concept as you experience.
I mean, it's just amazing. There's some phrases in there because I know that I'm working on that solo. I'm playing that,
Okay.
and there's some phrases in there that I mean, man, how but you work on those kind of things. Now, when you understand Bird's ethic, you can hear that he's a virtual also. You don't get like that just being a drug addict, okay, which people like to depict him as. That man worked hard, man, to do that. And now I'm hearing things like he always had a Bach book with him in his case, you know. But when and I'm studying a lot of Bach. Bach laid down all these rhythms that you hear Bird doing. Because I read the Bach studies, I do my Bach studies, like I used to do with Eric Dolphy, and they're the same phrases. Only, see, Bach didn't have a rhythm section. That's the most modern innovation in music, by the way, is the advent of the rhythm section. That gave birth to all of this music that's out here today. Um, but had they had a rhythm section, the swing would have been different. But now with the advent of the rhythm section, swings in the different ways, to motivate the swing and use the swings. Because it's nothing other than pulse, that's just pulse. Um, but I mean, he just, I was doing with a student one day, and we were doing some duets, pop duet, and I had just thought, boy, this sure sounds like Bird, and he said the exact same thing. He said, man, this sounds like Charlie Parker, because see, when you study music, that's why we hate this words. It's, oh, you're playing. No, I'm not. I'm playing music. And I'm studying music. And I'm bringing what I study to whatever I play. So now people want to name it things, that's on them. But Bird he was a student of music, and he could hear. So, plus he was had a photographic memory and perfect pitch. That didn't hurt.
I guess not. What Max Roach is doing on that is just amazing. He's making every hit, this
Yes.
is like that precisely. It's totally fluid, and it's thematic playing all the way through.
Yeah.
If you're watching this on YouTube after the fact, go back and just listen to Coco and listen to what Max Roach does all the way. Now, you had a chance to play with Max Roach for a number of years, and you recorded with him too.
Many years.
You played with Max Roach, you played with Miles Davis, people who knew Bird well. Did they talk about Bird to you?
Oh yeah, I'm always asking questions.
Yeah. Anything particularly stand out that you'd like to share that either Max or Miles would tell you about Bird?
I mean, nothing in particular. Just the fact that the way that they saw him as the master that he was. And I remember one time, when Max and Miles were together, and they said something like, "Man, look at this, Mike. Hey, this bitch Bird is gone now. Now that we learned how to play fast." Bird didn't see us being able to play like that. So I mean, they knew what a master he was. They were always in awe of him. Miles called him his best friend.
Wow. Okay. There's this story I've heard related by Max, and it's been confirmed to other people that he told them that I guess around 1944 or 45, when Max was a young guy, and they were just starting the gig on 52nd Street. Max showed up maybe late to a rehearsal, and they were waiting for him, and Bird was sitting at the drum set, and he asked Max if he could, and he sat down and he played 4 different rhythms with each component of the kit, and interdependently, and asked Max if he could do it. Max couldn't do it. And Max said that was a very consequential lesson for him. I was wondering if you heard that, story.
No.
Yeah, so his talents extended to the drum kit as well.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's move to a kind of different sound now. We'll hear 2 selections from a 1953 session produced by Norman Granz with a woodwinds, with a brass and woodwind, with a woodwind section in French horn and vocals, with the Dave Lambert and Annie Ross leading some singers, Bill Evans doing the arranging and conducting, I guess, after the Claude Thornhill Orchestra and after the birth of the Cool. And these are tracks that you're a big fan of this session, it seems. You wanted 2 tracks. Talk a little bit about it.
Well, I guess they were easier for me to transcribe, the what he was playing on there. And I love the way he chose where to play in between the voices, and even when we get to the strings and in the big band, when he got to there, he really knew how to compliment rather than to play over. He knew not to get in the way, because he could listen. When you listen, you got a heads up, because you hear everything. I mean, and you need to hear everything. You can't just listen. Like and I'm in a band and I'm just listening to the bass player, and then I'm missing the piano player. I'm missing the drummer. You have to be able to hear everything. Sometimes you might want to just listen to the bass player, But that's a choice. But ideally, everybody has to listen to everybody. You have to be one brain, you know. Because if you have one guy not listening and they're just listening to themselves, you know, that's not going to be, the music is not going to turn out well, you know.
Well, the two selections are a Hoagie Carmichael song called "In the Still of the Night,"
Still of the Night, yeah.
Still of the Night, and then "Old Folks," which was a popular song from 1938.
Yeah.
The lyrics by Dedetta Hill, and the composition by Willard Robeson. The lyric to "In the Still of the Night" is by Joe Trent. No, actually, yeah, Joe Trent wrote the lyric to it, and Hoagie Carmichael wrote the music. So consecutively, "In the Still of the Night" and "Old Folks." So
They were back to back. Yeah, they wanted back to back. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do these back to back. And again, Charlie Parker Ensemble, led by Gil Evans. The rhythm section is Charles Mingus and Max Roach. This was done 10 days after the Massey Hall session.
I didn't know that. Who was on piano? The
pianist here is Tony Aless. Tony Aless, A-L-E-S-S.
Yeah, okay.
Let's do it. Let's roll.
In the still of the night, as I gaze from my window at the moon in its flight, my thoughts all stray to you. In the still of the night, while the world is in slumber, all the times without number, darling, when I say to you, love me as I love you. Are you my life to
Well, a little factoid about old folks. That was the master take, and that was the ninth take. It took 9 takes to generate that one. And
Yeah.
on In the Still of the Night, which preceded it, it took 7 takes to get the
No, I've
master
heard
take.
all of them. I've heard all the takes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and talk about that a little bit.
Well, you hear him composing a solo.
Hmm.
You hear him composing his solo. It's not an improvisation, you know? I mean, I take offense when somebody says, after 50, 60 years of studying something, they say, I'm just making stuff up. You know, I hear him,
Uh,
I hear him composing his solo. Do you hear, I mean, even the master take, he came in just right. Because you hear him on the other takes experimenting where to come in, you know, where to start, where to come, you know, where to play, you know. And finally, by that, you know, he'd figure, okay, yeah, this is how to do it, you know, and that's when he composed that great solo.
Well, one of the great things about Parker's discography, not the commercial sessions so much, although some of them, but he'd go in the studio with no rehearsal. It'd be a big band and it'd be a chart. And he would play, you know, these perfectly, as you're saying, composed solos, just without very much, if any, pre-preparation. He would hear it.
Oh, he did the prep. You know, he's already done the preparation.
Uh,
Preparation was done years ago.
uh,
Yeah, he's done the
I mean, he'd respond to the music, like the session with Machito, let's say, or the with the Washington D.C. Orchestra, things like that. That's
Yeah. No, but he's done it. He's heard all of that. He's done all of that, you know, because when you know how to hear things, you know, you can't wait to get to the, you know, to get into that environment to go ahead and then really do it and prove that what you're hearing is really working, you know. But you know, if you don't know how to hear and you get show up cold and not knowing what you know, I mean, he's done all that work. When he gets in there, you know, but even then, you hear him working on it as they do it. You know, it's never there's not the only time it's a first take is when it's a working band. If you when he brings a working band into the studio, you don't hear a whole bunch of takes.
Well, one tune Parker knew really well was Night in Tunisia, Dizzy Gillespie's composition, which he played a lot with Dizzy on 52nd Street in different situations, and they recorded in March of 1946 in Los Angeles. His group with the New York group with Dizzy Gillespie was booked on the West Coast. They played a club in Hollywood called Billy Bird's for several weeks. And when the gig was over, Parker, rather than fly back to New York, decided to stay in Los Angeles and remain there for a while. So this was a from the recording session, I think, that generated Yardbird Suite and Moose the Mooch, things like this. And we're going to hear two different takes talking about different takes of Night in Tunisia. From the first take, it generated a break before the ensemble kind of broke down and decided to try again. And then we'll hear the full take. Tell us a little bit about the alto break, which is known in the history books as the famous alto break by Charlie Parker.
Right.
Out in Tunisia.
And it's funny. Well, there's a couple of stories about that, but I was reading a hip hop book, a book about you know, the origins of hip hop and how they use breaks, break it down. You know, there was one famous song called "The Breaks," and they mentioned Charlie Parker's break, and I said, "Oh, right, they're all breaks. That's what a break is." Louis Armstrong breaks. They did breaks. Breaks go way back before, you know, but Charlie Parker's break was a famous break because he brought a virtuosity to that break, and he filled that 4 bars. I mean, he filled that 4 bars up with fantastic technique and stuff, you know, and so people, you know, that they would scream, you know, and so that became the thing when you played Night in Tunisia, who's got the break, you know, and even a lot of arrangements. I think when we did it with Art, if I'm not mistaken, I think everybody might have taken a break because we did the shout, bang, you know, and everybody did that so that everybody had a chance to do the break.
So Art Blakey, you're talking about Art Blakey, and you were with him in the mid '60s, I guess, right?
I was 1965 and 66.
65 and 66. So shortly after Lee Morgan left the band for the second time,
I was when I joined the band. Lee Morgan was in the band.
Oh, okay. So you must have played Night in Tunisia a lot when Lee Morgan was in the band.
But you know what we played even more was Sidewinder.
Oh, okay.
A Sidewinder was a hit when I joined the band in 1965. That's when Sidewinder was at its height. Every show we had played, if we played 6 sets a night, we had to play Sidewinder every set.
Really? I don't think I've ever heard a version of Sidewinder by Art Blakey. I've never heard one of those air checks. Billy Higgins was the drummer on the original recording. Yeah.
No,
wow.
Came to see if they knew Lee Morgan was Lee Morgan was the messenger. Yeah. And they
okay.
So we played, that's easy for Art.
All right.
And we played the heck out of it.
Well, Night in Tunisia inspired musicians around the world, and we'll hear the famous alto break and then the original master tape.
One thing.
Yes, Gary.
Lee Morgan one night said, "Gary, come go with me. I want you to hear this tenor player." And so it was over. He had a gig over in Newark, New Jersey, and so I got my horn. I went over there. I went to sit in and everything. I got over there, and the first song they played was "Night in Tunisia." And the saxophone player took a break on Night in Tunisia that changed my whole way of looking at even a break or just looking at music in general. And that was Wayne Shorter.
Okay.
Wayne, he took that because everybody else up until then would take that break and just try to fill it up like Bird did with all that technique, But Wayne, with his cerebral, he said, bam! Oh my God! I never thought about that.
Well, Wayne had probably played it a couple of hundred times with the Messengers over his 5 years. Yeah.
Yeah, but this was before he joined the Messengers.
Oh, this was prior. Oh, this was before 1959 that you heard Wayne in Newark. I see.
No, this would have been, this was about like that because I moved to
This was before, okay, right, because Wayne joined the Messengers and Wayne Shorter joined the Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. I don't want to speak shorthand for the audience in 1959.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
That we have to do another public interview for you to tell your non-Charlie Parker story.
Yeah.
But let's hear these two, again, the Night in Tunisia fragment and the full version.
Okay.
1946.
Yeah.
That second break was pretty great too.
It was the same break.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
It was the same. I mean, the same idea. He did the same thing. That's a hard break. I mean, you know, he didn't do it all the time, but were they from the same session?
Yeah, yeah. March 28th, 1946. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that was the same break he played. I mean, after after the break, he was playing different stuff, but the break was the same.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, Miles Davis was on trumpet. Tenor solo was by Lucky Thompson.
Ah, that was yeah.
Dodo Marmarosa on piano, Arvin Garrison guitar, Vic McMillan bass, and Roy Porter was the drummer on that. Roy Porter, who had a big band in California and was, addressing the bebop developments out there at that time. I think Miles was in Los Angeles. He'd gone out there with Benny Carter and stuck around because Charlie Parker was there. That's what I seem to remember. Hopefully, I'm accurate.
Yeah.
On that one.
He was sounding good though. He was sounding more like Dizzy on that.
Oh, yeah.
I knew it was, but he was sounding, because that was who he loved. He loved Dizzy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he would. I saw somebody ask him one time. They said, "Who's your favorite trumpet player?" And I was
Dizzy Gillespie. Well, coming up now, we're going to hear two sessions from two tracks, I should say, from a January 17th, 1951 session that Charlie Parker did under the aegis of Norman Granz and not Verve at the time. I can't remember the name. Norgran maybe, or Mercury.
Or Clef.
But anyway, with Miles, we're going to hear Miles Davis again on these two tracks in 1951. And the rhythm section is Walter Bishop Jr. piano, Teddy Kotick on bass, and again Max Roach on drums.
Max was the last one to leave Bird.
Yes, yeah. although this came after Roy Haynes had been playing with Bird for a couple of years. I think Max left in the end of 48 or early in 49, and then Roy Haynes was working steadily with Bird, but Max was on this session. I think that's how it went. Mm-hmm. That's my understanding of it. But in any event, we're going to hear a bebop line, Au Privav, which is one of Bird's neologisms that he named tunes for. He had another one famously called Klaktovesed Stena. There's a recording of Ornette Coleman playing, actually. A location recording. Au Privav and KC Blues is the other one, which Parker harkens back to his days in Kansas City. So these came out when you were probably at a certain point in your a certain higher point in your development on the saxophone, I would think.
What year?
Well, this was recorded in 51.
Yeah, because
this was recorded in 51, and
I had it when it came out, and it was on a 78.
Yeah, it came out in 52 or 53, I guess. Anyway, a few words about these, or maybe we should just play them. We've been talking about everything. Maybe we should give everyone a break and just play, and then talk after we hear.
I need a break. I need a break.
JC Blues.
That's how you do it.
Not much more needs to be said.
I
Not
mean,
on that one.
you know, and it was something I wanted to say when you played the in the Still of the Night and the Old Folks. Those records showed me Bird showed me he was playing the blues on everything. Everything he ever played, he was playing the blues. So, you know, I call him, he was a blues man. He was just as much blues as Muddy Waters, you know, to me.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, during his formative years in Kansas City, he would have heard a whole lot of it. And,
Yeah.
that would have been in his DNA.
It's in the music's DNA.
Hmm.
It is the basis of this music is the blues. I mean, you know, that I found out like 1 o'clock jump. The reason why they had a name, the people would go to the dances. They wouldn't play a blues until about midnight when the party really was beginning. That the blues got the party started.
Hmm.
And I mean, the blues is the foundation of this. So, and I hear very little blues. And young musicians, it's hard for them to know how to play the blues because they don't do it. You know, I came up, some bands I was in, every song we played was the blues. Different.
When did you start going out there gigging as a kid in Baltimore? How old were you?
Probably, well, first I started going out sitting in with, you know, my dad took me to sit in with Sonny Stitt one day. That's a whole nother story. We don't have time for all of that. But, you know, so I was 14 when I actually met John Coltrane and Benny Golson when I was 14 at a jam session like that. Um,
Were they with Bull Moose Jackson or Earl
no,
Bostic?
I thought they were with Bull Moose Jackson, but Benny told me no, they were with who were they?
Not Johnny Hodges.
They were with Earl Bostic.
Earl Bostic.
Yeah. And I sat in with Max Roach around that time. So I probably started working 15 or 16.
Hmm. So you heard Charlie Parker. You had a chance. He played at a club near your house, and you didn't get to go in and actually see him, but you heard him.
Yeah.
I think that's a story we have time to talk about. Talk about your in-person experiences with Charlie Parker.
Well, I mean, you know, of course, I used to go around the corner to the Club Tijuana to listen and to hopefully meet the musicians if they would come outside for a smoke or come outside to get some air. You know, I met Johnny Hodges like that. I met Eddie Lockjaw Davis. I met, I think, Lou Donaldson. I met, you know, quite a few musicians. So I was around there every night for Charlie Parker, and he never came outside. He not one night, you know. But I heard him. I could hear him through the door, and there was a restaurant next door, which if you could stand in there, you could hear even better, you know, especially when the door open. I just couldn't see him. Just didn't get a chance to see him. But a friend of mine who later had a nightclub, Henry Baker, was the one that booked him at that club, the Tijuana, which happened to be his last week-long engagement of and
so it was in 1955 then.
Yes, 55. And so, it could have been late 54.
Well, he played a week in Chicago in the winter of '55. So
then it was 55 then. So you know, when I asked Henry about it, you know, I said, "Yeah, Henry, you know, I was outside every night waiting for him to come out." He said, "No, Bird went up to his dressing room every night. You know, after every show, he went up to the dressing room, stayed there. You know, and every night they were there for a 6-night engagement. He went back to New York every night. Bought the train. Henry took him to the train station, picked him up every night. You know, and you know, Henry being a saxophonist himself, you know, he was so happy to be with Bird just to pick him up and everything. So he was trying to engage in conversation, and Bird just wasn't talking because I'm sure he wasn't well, you know.
No, probably not.
Yeah. And so finally, the last night was the really good night. The last Sunday night, club was packed, the music was great and everything. And so Henry was excited. You know, when he was taking him back to the train station, he was saying, "Oh man, what a night, man! It was a great night, huh, Bird?" You know, Bird looked at him and said, "They're not ready, P. They're not ready."
That's all he said, huh? Wow, wow. Well, do you have any recollection of the sound of what his horn of his the vibration of his sound in the live space as opposed to the recordings?
Oh, it was just as magnificent as always. You know, I mean, it might have been a little bigger, but you know, when you got microphones and stuff. But what was interesting is that one night, oh, you know, he was playing a ballad, and I heard him singing. He was singing the lyrics. You could hear him off mic singing the lyrics to the song, and he sounded like Billy Eckstein. He sang like that,
Wow.
and had a good voice
Hmm.
because he had a good speaking voice. So you know,
Beautiful speaking voice.
yeah. And I had a vocal teacher that said, if you have a good speaking voice, you will have a good singing voice.
Wow. Okay. Well, you were mentioning your father taking you to jams, taking you around and sitting in with Sonny Stitt, who is famously a taskmaster in those situations and the master of all of them.
Yeah.
And that fortuitously leads into the next track, which is I guess a rite of passage at jam sessions since it was since Bird first started playing it in the late 1940s, and since it was recorded in 1953, and that's Confirmation.
Oh yeah.
Talk about Confirmation a little bit.
Yeah, Confirmation.
I'm sure you played it dozens of times yourself.
Oh, played 1,000, probably
1,000. Excuse me.
Yeah. I guess that was a song that, and that was a set of changes that Bird worked out over you know, rhythm like changes and Honeysuckle Rose kind of changes. And so everybody was familiar with them in a way. And since they were different, it was almost like learning giant steps today, you know, although giant steps is more complicated. But at the time, they were complicated, you know, some of those songs. Now you look back, they're not that complicated. Even giant steps isn't once you understand it, you know. But so Confirmation was like and it was the head was even harder than the harmonic chord, and so you know, people would call that song to keep other people off the bandstand for one thing, you know. So I don't know that, you know. So
Rite of passage, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
A lot of key changes in that, so a lot of modulations in.
Well, no, not necessarily. It's just moves in a different way, you know, and it's just moving like in whole steps and 2/5s and things. But he configured it a little different. You hear him; he did that with a lot of the blueses, and what I've learned through the years, if I have an idea that I'm trying to work into my music vocabulary, the easiest way for me to figure out how to do that is with either rhythm changes or the blues. And so I think that's what he was doing. You know, Train did it. Everybody does it because that's you. I mean, especially with the blues, it's only 12 bars, so you get a chance. You repeat it very often, so you really have to work on that idea. But rhythm is also the same thing. So you're really familiar with the rhythm change and the structure. So when you add something new, you know, it's easier to kind of figure out how to use it. You know? So I think that's what he was doing with Confirmation.
Well, let's hear the commercial recording of it from July 1958. It's a quartet date. Al Haig was the pianist, Percy Heath on bass, and again Max Roach on drums. Confirmation.
Okay.
I don't know what to say. Confirmation. Wow. Always sounds fresh.
Yeah,
Hear Charlie Parker track 200 times and it sounds fresh every time.
yeah,
Maybe.
yeah, because it is fresh.
Hmm.
It is fresh. That's one reason. Well, that's a whole nother subject. But that's one reason why it's not imperative for the marketplace to sell this music because it stays fresh and it has a long shelf life.
Okay. That's an interesting way to think about it. I never thought of it that way.
Oh yeah,
But it makes sense.
yeah. No, they have to sell the music. They spend a whole lot of money on. They have to make that money back because it's only a fad,
Hmm.
and in a year or two, nobody will even want it. you know,
Hmm.
but people are still going to want this hundreds of years from now. That's why they want your masters.
Hmm.
That's why they try to hold on to them, even though they belong to us.
Hmm. Gary, when you got to New York, you matriculated at Juilliard, and
I didn't
it,
graduate, but
you
I
matriculated there. In 1958, was it?
1958. Yeah,
So I'm assuming you've been to New York somewhat, but what were musicians? This was 3 years after Charlie Parker died. Charlie Parker died on March 12th, 1955.
yeah.
Is Charlie Parker still was his memory still a present among the major musicians in New York? Because I'm sure you knew a lot of them from having seen them and met them in Baltimore. What were people thinking about Parker's legacy at that time? We're just moving into 1959 then,
Mhm.
and the innovations in the music that started taking hold right after you got to New York City. So I'm just interested in how you experienced other people addressing Bird's legacy when you got to New York
Well,
City.
I mean, Bird is like addressing Bach or Mozart or Beethoven. He that's a classic. So, I mean, that in that respect, yeah. But I mean, New York. What was happening for me in New York when I when I came, the older musicians were saying, because it was so exciting. I mean, Birdland was open. The first five spot on that was coming to the. I mean, there was just music everywhere, all over in Brooklyn, and I met Bud Powell in Brooklyn. Played a set with Bud Powell one
Oh
night.
wow!
Yeah, I mean, it was just, and but the older musicians were saying, "Yeah, but it's not like it used to be." I said, "Damn."
Well, I bet the musicians who were around then a few years later said, "Oh, hey, it's not like
I
it used
say
to be."
that. I say that now.
Yeah, yeah. That's the nature of aging and generation transmitting through the generations. So you
Yeah.
have to tell me though, Gary. Tell me about your set you set in with Bud Powell.
Well,
Was he operating at full capacity when you played with him?
well, playing wise, yeah,
It was, yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, he changed my whole. you know, After that, I knew what a piano player was supposed to do.
Uh,
You know, yeah. But I met him one night, man, because I used to hang in Brooklyn. When I first came to New York.
where the Blue Coronet or the Turbo Lounge or
Yeah,
another
Garnett, Turbo Village,
Turbo Village.
Continental. And there was a what the club in the not the club Harlem, but there was a club the Baby Grand. It was a Baby Grand in Brooklyn. You know,
Okay.
right on Fulton Nostrand, if I remember correctly. So yeah, so a lot of my friends were from Brooklyn. Like Andrew Cyril he's from Brooklyn. We met when I first started at Juilliard. We used to hang. The three of us was me, Andrew, and Gratian Marker.
Oh, okay.
And so my first gig in New York was at the Turbo Village in Brooklyn with that band. Uh, but so one night we were at the Continental Club Continental up on Nostrand, and we had just come in and we were getting ready to go in the club, and there was a guy laying on a table, and the club owner came out and saw us. He said, "Man," they saw the guy laying on. Said, "Man, get this bum out of here, man! Throw this guy out of here." And one of my friends said, "Man, that's Bud Powell." And so it was Bud. And so we got Bud up and we took him home, which wasn't far. He was down on St. Mark's, and we took him home. And so that's the first time I met him. So I would see him around, I don't know whether he ever knew who I was because I saw him the night I sat in with him. It wasn't really his gig. He was just sitting in. I was sitting in a jam session, and he was sitting at a table, and I was sitting maybe about 5 tables away, and he was just staring at And I said, man, this boy probably staring at me. And then I had to get up, and I think I went to the men's room. And when I got up and I saw him, he was still staring in my direction. So I realized he wasn't really staring at me. He was just in my direction. But anyway, so we played 2 songs. We played Bud's Bubble, and I don't remember. I think maybe I'll remember April or something like that. But man, that changed my whole. I knew what a piano player was supposed to sound like, and supposed to help you, and listen because he listened. Maybe he didn't talk so much because he listened from the inside. That's for sure. Yeah.
Wow. Well, the next selection we have lined up is from a concert that was recorded and billed as the greatest jazz concert of all time. And who am I to argue with that? It was in Toronto at a room called Massey Hall with Charlie Parker, who recorded under the name Charlie Chan for contractual reasons, of course. Dizzy Gillespie on trumpet, Bud Powell on piano, Charles Mingus, who would later overdub his bass parts on bass, and Max Roach on drums. And the track Gary selected was Hot House, which is Ted Dameron's contrafact on What Is This Thing Called Love, which is another one of those songs that all the bebop players and post-bebop players like to play and make contrafacts of, like Subconsciously by Lee Konitz and things like that. So it's a 9-minute track, and then we'll have a couple more short tracks. And that'll be it for this fascinating encounter with Gary Bartz on the music of Charlie Parker on behalf of the National Jazz Museum in Harlem.
And I would like to play Hot House.
we faded out on the bass solo, which is we're having time considerations, but so apologies for that. It was Charles Mingus' bass solo on Hot House. Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Bud Powell, live in concert in Toronto in 1953. Max Roach and Charles Mingus, drums and bass. You remember first hearing that recording, Gary? That was it was recorded in pretty good fidelity on good equipment, and it was set for LP length. So everybody stretched out, so it didn't have the compressed quality. Rather than hearing Charlie Parker play, 2 or 3 choruses, you get to hear everybody stretch out. So I think that's one reason that recording, apart from just the amazing solos, why that recording made such an impact on people at the time.
Yeah, no, I remember it. I was busy transcribing the solos, learning the song. That was a go-to album.
Go-to album. Well, we're in the home stretch of this edition of Desert Island Discs on the music of Charlie Parker with Gary Bartz, but we have a few more things to play. By the way, did you ever, during your time in New York, play in any of Charles Mingus's bands?
Oh, yeah. You didn't know about that?
I did not know about that. I'm learning all sorts of things about you today. Well, you were speaking before about Charlie Parker and the blues, and one of the most famous blues performances in the whole canon is Parker's Mood. In 1948, it inspired a lyric by the singer known as King Pleasure, and Eddie Jefferson used to sing it also. And I guess one thing, Parker's solos, I mean, apart from being composed, they were just so melodic. Seems like
they were composed.
You could create songs just out of those inventions.
Because they're compositions.
Yeah.
That's the only reason why you can't do that if they're not compositions.
Right.
It's theme and variation. That's
right.
it.
Well, this is one of the best. Charlie Parker, 1948, with John Lewis on piano, Curly Russell bass, and Max Roach on drums. Parker's Mood.
Okay.
Parker's mood. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we have gone through a lot of great music on this encounter,
Yes.
and learned a whole hell of a lot. What's it like listening to all these Charlie Parker? I mean, do you listen to Charlie Parker every day? Do you still listen to Bird a lot?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm musician. Our job is to study music.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I'm working on a project, and so the project is a Charlie Parker project. So I
What can you tell us about this project?
gonna be different.
Oh, that's it. Okay. All right. It's going to be different. Okay. That's enough. Enough to pique our curiosity. And I hope in these terrible times we're living in that you're able to get it done.
Oh, it will get done.
It will get done. Yes. Well, it's nice to see you, Gary. It's nice to see your face and hear your voice and talk to you. Thank you very much for agreeing to sit through this interrogation.
Oh, I enjoy it. Listening to Charlie Parker is never an interrogation.
No, it's
Brad,
true. It's true.
nice memories of us many nights at Bradley's.
Yes, which I have my picture over there. That's true. There were many nights at Bradley.
Yeah.
I guess to conclude, Gary has selected perhaps if Charlie Parker ever had a jukebox hit, this was it. I mean, I remember hearing this on jukeboxes when I was in school in Chicago, and I'm sure you heard it on jukeboxes around Baltimore when you were a kid, and it's just friends. Tell me about your response to this when you heard it. Bird's
Yeah.
statement on just friends.
The strings, it just was perfect. It was a perfect match. But if you listen once again to the takes leading up to Just Friends, you get a better idea of what I mean about solo. Because you have to know, how to where to come in. With nobody's telling you come in here. So it's up to you because this is our piece. And so making those decisions, it's very interesting. I know people hate to have these outtakes. I don't like a lot of outtakes myself. I don't get paid for outtakes.
No, that's right. And it's not what you want, what they wanted you to hear, also. But with Parker, I guess every note he played seems to be, a very valuable subject of close study.
Yeah, and so for study wise, it's interesting, but I wouldn't normally like it, but here I am eavesdropping.
Here you are doing it yourself. Yes, that's right. Being in places where you shouldn't be, but it's good that they're there, and you can hear how deeply Gary Bartz has immersed himself in the music of Charlie Parker for just about all of your life, and that's saying something. That's saying something.
Years I missed Bird. I missed him the first 6 years.
No, well, you can't have everything, right? Okay. Thank you, Gary Bartz.
Thank you, Ted Panken.
This is, again, Desert Island Discs. I'm Ted Panken. We're recording this in August. The word, I keep wanting to say it's going to be broadcast or air. It's going to go over the internet and be released either in September or in October. So we'll be back. But we're saying hello into the future to you from Desert Island Discs, and thank you for staying tuned. Or staying tuned. I'm using radio nomenclature again. Thank you for being with us. And this is Just Friends, and that's it. Just Friends.